Hello everyone and welcome to our podcast hosted by Anthony and Giacomo.
So today we're going to dive into the Billenium, a short story written by J.G Ballard, which goes on about a dystopian, futuristic science fiction world where space is luxury and freedom slowly fades away.
So today we're going to cover many points such as themes, plot, tone, mood, literary devices, and many more. So get ready to squeeze in and let's begin. And for the ones that did not read the story, we're going to give you a little plot.
So we're going to start with the exposition, the start. So in a future world plagued by severe overpopulation, Ward lives in a tiny cubicle and dreams of freedom and space.
The rising action. After moving in with Rossiter, a fellow lodger Ward discovers a large hidden room and secretly starts using it.
The climax. Ward and Rossiter share the room with a few others, but it starts to become increasingly crowded.
The falling action. The large room becomes divided and overrun, and they lose their sense of freedom.
Finally, the resolution. The room becomes completely filled, and Ward realizes they are back where they started. So Anthony, tell me, what are the main themes present in this story?
So one of the main theme is overpopulation, because as we can see, the city is overcrowded on the sidewalks as well as in the buildings, where on the sidewalks people are shoulder to shoulder, they can't even move, and in the buildings people live in small cubicles, and even the staircases and corridors are overcrowded. The city's population, as we know, is about 30 million, which can be compared to modern days Shanghai, Tokyo, even New Delhi, which we know are very, very crowded cities and polluted as well.
But so tell me, what do you think about the theme value of space?
So that's a very good question. So as we saw in the story, Ward had an extra half meter square in his cubicle. And due to that, he was ejected by his landowner because he didn't want to pay extra rent. And the landowner asked him extra rent because of that only half meter squared. And honestly, I think that's quite crazy, first of all, because why would he come measure the cubicle of
That's
work?
quite crazy.
It's
But that's quite interesting because you can really see just from this half meter how important the comfort is and the space is for people, and how they cannot live without this extra space.
Indeed.
So Anthony, do you have maybe one last theme that could help us really understand what the characters in the story endure?
So we can talk about the mental and physical health of those people living in the city. So they really have a lack of freedom. They're unable to see their family and friends due to the crowds in the city on the sidewalks, and due to that they can get bored very easily, and they get bored around people, which is very oppressive. They might go insane, and due also to that claustrophobia.
Yeah, and if I may touch on that theme, I think for their physical health, well, you talked about claustrophobia. They all walk on each other, step on each other. That could really damage their physical health, not only their mental health, but physical health. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, there's the pollution, the air pollution, the noise pollution, also the poor quality foods. They say that in the text, and that really damages their physical health. And so I think,
they can even die. Getting stepped on. I mean,
death is way easier like that. So I think we should now move on to the next point, which is genre and style.
Yes, so as you said earlier in the intro, you mentioned dystopian science fiction. Yeah. So could you maybe expand on dystopian, please?
Of course. Well, dystopian basically is an unfair society with a lot of suffering in a futuristic setting. Now, Ballard tries to condemn, to criticize this trend, and I think you will talk about it later, through his text, his writings, and the themes he gives us. Now that we were talking about genre, I would like to know the conventions in Billenium because I really don't understand them.
So, well, actually, it's quite easy. Ballard is trying to warn us about the future. So, what future? Urban expansion and the increasing population in our world. Cities like Tokyo make their cities grow, and more, which obviously increases the population. He also tries to critique the society and government control over the world of Billenium. He tries to say that the government is ineffective on overpopulation. And to end with, we can talk about human nature and how the protagonist, Resistor and Ward, try to escape their miserable and oppressive world, and they did succeed to go out of this. But human nature, being too kind, being scared of saying no, made them finish in the same situation they were before.
Self-destruction.
Which again shows how human nature and people make the same mistakes all over again and again.
Yeah.
Next up, Ballard style.
Realistic, descriptive,
Ironic?
and reflective.
So it's realistic because Ballard really makes his word believable for us. We can easily relate to it. So, for example, if we take the rush hour, everything is stuck, everyone is going everywhere, the transports are crowded, we're shoulder to shoulder to people in the metro mostly. We can not even move sometimes. We step on each other, which kind of relates to what's happening in Billenium. So we can really feel like it's real what he's saying. It's not that exaggerated, even though sometimes it can be, but it might be real at some point in our world.
Yeah, now for the description. Ballard really creates a vivid description of the place, of the crowds, and of the small cubicles to really give us an idea, as he says, to really give us an idea of how it looks. And he also adds an auditory imagery because of all the sound. We can really imagine all the sound, the cars, all the people talking together. And so, yeah.
Now, for the ironic style of Ballard, well, it's quite subtle. Maybe not everyone can see it, but it's mostly at the end when Ward and Rossiter get back in the same situation they were in. So, because of their kindness and their human nature, as said earlier, well, they end up in the same miserable situation they were in at the beginning.
So, for the last point for the style, it's reflective. Ballard really creates a text that pushes us to think like real life. Through his text, he wants to criticize modern real life by the traffic.
We can say he's a bit seeing in the future in the end, because that wasn't written in the 21st century, it was in the 20th century.
So he really imagined what life would be like after, with crowded people, a lot of noise, and so yeah. So what's Ballard's tone in Billenium?
So Ballard's tone is quite serious and calm. He tries to evoke how dull and miserable their life is. He's also criticizing seriously how overpopulation is a possibility for humanity.
And so Ballard, we think that he also uses a very critical tone. Why? Because he wants to criticize this modern society and how blindly they accept a crowded and uncomfortable life.
So now, let's talk about mood and atmosphere. Giacomo, how did you feel when reading Billenium?
Well, personally, I'm a bit claustrophobic, so I could really feel that oppressive atmosphere on me. And how was this atmosphere created? Sorry, well, really by this vivid description that Ballard's created, and like all this crowd and these cubicles, I could really feel it. And personally, I couldn't like stay one day in the cubicle. I know it. Anthony, how did you feel?
Well, I really felt quite similarly, but I really focused on the physical and mental part of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's quite uncomfortable to feel like
Yeah.
when you go out, you're gonna get stepped on, pushed, get bruises everywhere. I think that was very scary for me, and I felt really uncomfortable when seeing this type of things. Also, when for the mental health part, where the characters cannot see their family and friends.
Yeah.
I think I might go insane after weeks.
I couldn't not see my family, my friends.
Exactly. No interactions would make me go insane.
So for you, it's more about the health.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So now let's talk about the characters.
Yeah. Well, how do you imagine Rossiter?
Well, I think he's serious and thoughtful. He knows and he acknowledges the values of privacy and freedom. And he evolves gradually, but he falls back into the system that he wanted to escape. But I think he's, however, a bit naive by thinking that having such a big room for him and Ward will go okay, and nothing's gonna happen if he let people in. And so yeah, I think he's quite naive. And I think talking about naive, Ward is a bit naive, no?
Well, I think Rossiter and Ward's behavior are both a bit the same. You know, they're both intelligent. They have ideas in some ways to change the world, and most importantly, they value their personal space. They know like how important space is. However, at the discovery of the room, they become hopeful, especially Words. He sees his freedom. He has hope. However, at the end of the story, this hope is lost, totally lost, because of his decisions. So I think he is also a bit naive, and he doesn't really take into consideration all the space he has. So now for the POV, which is a third-person limited point of view, mainly following Words.
We feel what he feels, and also we want what he wants, because he wants to get more space in the oppressive world, and through the story we feel like we're in his mind, and we also want that for him and to make him feel better. And yes, motifs
And symbols.
So for motifs, one example is overcrowding and confinement. So Ballard uses repetition of words such as cubicles, narrow, cramped, crowds, jammed, words that really reinforces this idea of overpopulation and oppression atmosphere that feels uncomfortable. He does that thanks to these repetitions.
Yeah. And another example is space as commodity, you know, very important. How can we see that is Ballard really intensifies the fact of measuring everything in square meters, and he really wants to show us how small it is, how uncomfortable people were living.
Exactly.
In that world, in that city. So yeah, really uncomfortable. So now for the symbols. So I've actually noticed that at the end of the text, the last sentence, I think they talk about a wardrobe. Do you know what's the symbol of this wardrobe?
So yeah, at the end of the story, we say that they take out the wardrobe from that spacious room.
Yeah.
Well, the symbol of that wardrobe is, as Ward I think mentioned it. He said that it's beautiful.
Yeah,
I think by saying that, it kind of adds personality to the room, personality of probably freedom. It shows how free they are in that room, how good they feel compared to the outside world where they're all together, cramped and uncomfortable. It's really the sign of hope when they have space, and yeah.
Okay, well, I found a very powerful symbol, I think, which is the cubicles. I think they symbolize overpopulation, confinement, and dehumanization. Why? Because it really shows that there are lots of people living at the same place at the same time, and at the end they are forced. They have to follow these social norms the government imposed. They have to follow it, and it also, like, they look the same, so it also maybe symbolizes uniform. You know, the same, with just like the same identical number of people, and so yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite dull, quite recurrent, and
yeah, quite boring at the end.
Boring,
you know?
yeah.
It's bad for the mental health. So yeah, as we talked before.
All right, now it's time for everyone's favorite part.
Literary devices!
So, Ballard uses imagery. What kind of imagery?
I personally think that visual imagery is one that comes up very often in the text. It's visual imagery, claustrophobic imagery, really to immerse us in the story and really put us through their suffering. This use of visual imagery creates a mood of discomfort and anxiety, showing us what they had to endure every day, and that it's not easy to be in a small, tight space every single day.
But there's not only visual imagery, but also auditory imagery. So, for example, when the characters are trying to sleep in their room, they're unable to do so because of the constant noise around them.
Yeah.
It's really impacting on their mental state, and they cannot stay in a calm environment. They always hear things, around noises, loud noises, people talking. They're unable to stay relaxed, calm, and able to sleep in the end.
Yeah. But you know what I think? Juxtaposition is also a main literary devices that comes up very often in the text. Why? Because Ballard often contrasts the beauty of the hidden room and the horrendous worlds outside of this room.
Yeah.
And this contrast, this juxtaposition, really appears when they discover the room, so towards the middle of the story. It appears there.
So we can also talk about Ballard's use of metaphors. So he mentions that the crowd on the sidewalks is moving uniformly in one single direction, and he compares it to a river at full tide as a stream going in one direction. So he really evokes how difficult it is to pass through it, as it's very dense, going in one direction, which again shows how the overpopulation and everyone is stick together, which shows how you cannot pass through it like in real life. When you try to go through a crowd, it's very hard to.
Yeah, and I think it's really thanks to those devices that we can see ourselves in these streets with all of these people packed. And so yeah.
Oh, someone is calling us. Yes?
Hello. I was just wondering how Ballard's cultural background is related to Billenium.
Oh, that's a very good question. I'll let Giacomo answer that.
Sure. Well, first of all, Ballard was born in Shanghai, China. He lived through war, World War II, more precisely, and there he was in a prison cell with all of his family. And at that time, in this city, it was very noisy, a lot of noise, the war noise, a lot of pollution, bad health. And then he immigrated towards England, and there he lived in a quiet place. And now we can really see a contrast between his youthful life and adult life. Mm-hmm. So if from the short story, the first part of the story before they find the big room, I think it symbolizes his youthful life.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
You know why? Well,
Tell me.
because his youthful life, as I said, it was very overcrowded, a lot of noises, and just like in the Billenium, the first part of the Billenium, there was all of this pollution, bad health, overcrowdment. But then when they found the big room, they like it's peace, it's freedom, it's quiet, just like his second part of his life.
In England.
Yeah, in England, where he lives quietly, peacefully. However, he then decides to move to England until his death, and I think that's
To London, you mean?
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I think that really also symbolizes the end of the story, where everybody gets in the big room, and it's once again overcrowded with a lot of noise in the city, the capital. So yeah, but I have a question for you. What about the time and context?
So actually, Ballard wrote Billenium in 1961. That's when the world had only 3 billion of population. When we compare now, or when we have 8 billion population,
Yeah.
I think it's quite amazing how Ballard can foreshadow the increase of population and now the almost overpopulation in some countries, and he manages to describe that in his story quite well, I think.
Yeah.
Now it's also about 15 years after World War II, which is followed by a population boom due to medical advances and technologies. So again, he manages to explain that in Billenium. And finally, I would like to mention a last point. Mass production in 1961, so companies were producing more and more products, and I think that kind of shows how the number of products kind of shows in Billenium how life is reduced to numbers, such as the rooms. So they're always saying, oh, that room is 4 meters square, 4.5 meters square, then it's reduced to 3 meters square, and they're saying how population is increasing all the time, how many people are coming in the city, and I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, I think really life in the Billenium is based on numbers. So I want to have higher meters squared, but I want to have less people in my room. So yeah, I just think it's based on numbers.
Exactly. All right, that's the end of our podcast. Before we have to share this with another 5 people, please stay there.
I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. It might earn us an extra meter square.
We've been Anthony and Giacomo.
Fighting for freedom, one metaphor at a time.
See you next time.
So Anthony, what do you think are the main... First of all, I loved it so much. I enjoyed reading it. Second of all, since I'm in public... So Anthony, what do you think are the main... Today we're gonna dive in Billenium, the shorts.
Hello everyone and welcome to our podcast.